Welcome to the Freak Show, fellow freaks.
I am Matthew Brockmeyer.
And I'm Christa Carmen.
And this is...
Murder Coaster.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second episode and conclusion of Fast Times at Upper Merion High, the story of the mainline murders. Get ready for craziness, for today's episode has more twists and turns than a python in a pretzel factory, and enough sex and drugs to make a hippie blush. When we last left you, things were really heating up in the elite upper-class Philadelphia suburb of Mainline. And today, things boil over. So without further ado, let's get to it.
Let's begin. Chapter 1. Fast Times at Upper Merion High, Part 2. One fine day in the spring of 1978, Dr. J. Smith's secretary Ida came bursting into his office, screaming at the school principal, who sat languid in his plush chair. "Do you know there's students smoking dope in the parking lot?"
A grim look of amusement crossed the principal's face, his rubbery lips curling into an obnoxious grin, his watery, dead eyes taking her in as he said, "What do you want me to do with them, Ida? Kill them?"
And things were seriously heating up between the lovers of English chair Bill Bradfield, taking a decidedly ugly turn.
When Sue Myers discovered Susan Reinert smoking a cigarette and sipping her coffee in the teacher's lounge, she stormed in and began kicking her, hissing between clenched teeth.
"If you know what's good for you and your family, you'll stay away from Bill Bradfield."
A scuffle ensued that had to be broken up by the other teachers. Things were swirling into utter madness. At one point, Sue Myers would peek through a hall window and into Bill Bradfield's classroom, spying on him, seeing one of his students, a girl named Wendy Ziegler, a bright, seemingly wholesome girl in all his gifted classes, stroll in, and the teacher and student exchange a kiss on the lips as a greeting.
So he's fucking her too, Sue thought. And she was right. Very right.
And Dr. Smith's daughter, Stephanie, whose newlywed husband, Edward Huntsberger, was in jail for possession, would show up at the school bedraggled, strung out, and dope sick, begging for money for a fix.
Things were going missing from the school, too. All kinds of weird things. Office supplies, science equipment, paintings disappearing right off the walls. A typewriter, specially designed for one of the special needs students, was stolen. I mean, how low can you go? And gallons and gallons of nitric acid from the science lab.
And then came big news. Dr. J. Smith, the Prince of Darkness, was retiring. At least that was what was said publicly. Privately, rumors abounded that the school board had finally caught wind of his several shoplifting complaints and forced him out.
At the last faculty meeting presided over by Dr. Smith, despite often bumping heads with him and spreading strange rumors, weird poet Bill Bradfield arose and gave a glowing testimonial to the Principle of Darkness, comparing him to Nobel Peace Prize winning scholar Albert Schweitzer.
Fucking hell, man. And as we'll see, the hypocrisy and two-facedness which Bill Bradfield displayed towards his boss would take on crazy dimensions.
Chapter 2. The Wrath of Dr. J.
Dr. J. Smith's daughter, Stephanie, was so terrified of her father that she actually thought he'd somehow caused her mother's cancer by putting toxic substances in her food, especially when the cancer began to rapidly grow in her stomach, intestines, and lymph nodes. Stephanie, writing to a friend,
So much cancer in such a short time. No way. He did it.
Stephanie had married her boyfriend, Eddie Huntsberger. Eddie, somehow, like everyone else in this story, loved literature and wanted to go back to school to get an English degree. And if this case has taught me anything, it's never trust an English major.
I mean, fair. Stephanie and Eddie struggled with their addiction to heroin, but managed to get off the streets and into rehab and kick. Eddie's parents supported the young couple and were relieved to see them clean and beginning to get on with their lives.
In February of 1978, Stephanie and Eddie visited Eddie's parents, asking for help with their tax returns. They then told them that they were going to visit Stephanie's father, Dr. J. Smith, and their last words were, "We'll be back a little later."
They were never seen again.
When asked about them, Dr. Smith would simply say, "They've moved to California," after Eddie discovered he had a warrant for his arrest in Pennsylvania for writing forged prescriptions.
But there was no warrant for forged prescriptions, and to this day no one knows what happened to them.
On the warm summer night of August 19th, 1978, a young couple were sitting on the curb outside the Gateway Shopping Center, eating pizza, when they saw a terrifying sight. A tall, gangly shape slunk out from the darkness. A vampiric-looking figure with a hood up over its head and a mask of some sort covering its face. In its hands, 2 pistols.
Terrified, the couple slowly slunk away, watching as the figure circled a parked van, peering into its windows, before ducking into a brown Ford Granada and driving off.
The couple ran to a payphone and called the police. Officers arrived to make a report, and as they were talking to the couple, the brown Granada pulled back into the parking lot, the couple saying, There, that's the car."
Police pursued, heading south on Route 202, and eventually pulled the car over. Behind the wheel was 50-year-old Dr. J.C. Smith.
Inside the car, police found 4 loaded handguns, the sleeve of a football jersey turned into a mask, a bolt cutter, an oil filter that had been turned into a homemade silencer, strapping tape, gloves, and 2 syringes filled with Placidil, a tranquilizer which produces unconsciousness in seconds.
Dr. J claimed he had the guns to scare off some kids who'd been bothering him, and that the syringes belonged to his junkie son-in-law.
The Prince of Darkness was hauled downtown and booked, and when given his phone call, was overheard saying, "Before you even go to the bail bondsman, Get over to the house and take everything out, including the files.
So, a couple of detectives headed over to his house to stake it out. And at 2 a.m, a slight, bespectacled man who looked very much like Woody Allen pulled up and went inside and came out with several file boxes, and the cops pounced on him.
Inside the file boxes were 2 pounds of weed, busted. The nerdy little fellow, who in fact was an actual librarian with 5 college degrees and had been friends with Dr. J for many years, explained he was just doing a favor for a friend, that he didn't even know what was in the boxes. And the cops, they actually believed the guy and let him go. But now they had probable cause to search the Prince of Darkness's home.
A search of the principal's house revealed over 3 pounds of marijuana, stolen Army ID cards, Brink's security guard uniforms, including a fake armored car driver ID with his photo in it, Valium, Librium, Placidil, latex gloves, more homemade silencers, a ton of weird porn, including books on bestiality with titles like The Canine Tongue, bleh, Her Bestial Dreams, Animals as Sex Partners, Carla's Puppy Love, Her Four-Legged Lover, The Bestial Erotics, and Animal Fever. I had a really hard time reading that list without
Gnarly, dude.
actually getting nauseous. Swinger magazines, both gay and straight, chains, locks, bondage gear, and a, quote, pink regular-sized dildo, and an extra-large black dildo with manual crank squirts water.
And there were lots of items that had been stolen from Upper Merion High: office machines, stationery, paintings, and 4 gallons of nitric acid.
There was also a box of blue plastic combs with the name of Smith's Army Reserve Unit embossed on them, 79th USA ARCOM. This bundle of combs would later become very important evidence.
The news hit King of Prussia like a bombshell. The principal of Upper Merion High School, a retired colonel with a PhD, arrested. And now, the main suspect of being the mysterious fake armored car driver.
Oddly enough, the doctor's biggest concern was that folks would think he was gay. He went to great lengths to insist that the gay pornography was for research, and he was writing a book entitled How to Prevent Homosexuality in Your Children.
And as for the bestiality, well, he readily admitted he was planning on launching a mail-order firm exploring the possibility of training animals as sexual surrogates.
What the fuck? He'd rather people think he was fucking dogs than being gay?
It's fucking crazy, dude. What a freak, man. It's sad. And when the cops went to check out his accusation that the syringes and drugs belonged to his son-in-law, they found that his daughter and her husband were nowhere to be found, that they'd mysteriously disappeared.
Investigators went to the methadone clinic where the couple went and were told that when they'd missed their scheduled appointment, the clinic had called about looking for them and had talked to none other than the Prince of Darkness himself, Dr. Smith, who told them,
"They're going to detox themselves. I've gotten them Placidil and some real good pot. And thank you for the help, and by the way, I've got access to good pot if you're ever interested."
Then police discovered someone had been forging their names on welfare checks for 6 months.
I wonder who could have been doing that. Meanwhile, Dr. Smith was released on bail and awaited trial.
Chapter 3: The Ice Maiden.
A little different than all the rest. I'm quite old-fashioned, wear a hat, sometimes play chess. And when I'm out, I'm looking for that vintage fling. finally seem impossible to score. So I dream on to someday find that vintage love.
Meanwhile, the fast times at Upper Merion High were going strong with old Bill Bradfield and his cult of nerdy English teachers.
And then a new girl came onto the scene, Joanne Aitken.
Like Sue Myers and Susan Reinert, Joanne was short, nerdy, and bookish, very intellectual, and deeply involved with the Great Book Club.
Joanne was director of admissions at St. John's College in Annapolis, where she'd been an undergraduate, and was now preparing to attend Harvard. Everyone who saw her says she had a Gothic beauty to her. Large, almond-shaped eyes, shimmering black hair she parted knife-sharp, always stylishly dressed in all black. A Gothic beauty that instantly made all of Bill's other lovers extremely jealous.
Sue Myers thought she looked like a 19th century damsel in distress from an Emily Bronte novel, and took to calling her the Ice Maiden.
Susan wrote Bill, the poet, a letter stating, "You have sent out many messages to many women that you were interested in them sexually, and that you cared for them in a special way, including former student Wendy, Sue, and me. Sue has certainly borne the brunt of it, hence her misdirected anger at me. I've always felt jealousy, now at Joanne in particular, but always had a feeling of uniqueness to carry me through. Hope it was justified."
And at the same time that Susan is writing this letter to Bill, young former student Wendy, who'd now graduated from Upper Merion and was preparing to attend college in California, was also writing to him, saying,
"I love you madly, passionately, eternally, and infinitely. I need you to be with me. I don't see how I can survive days, let alone years. I am meant to be a mother. I am ordered to you as a wife, and I thank God I feel this way."
And Joanne is also writing to Bill, saying,
"I love you beyond belief. I don't care what else happens as long as I can be with you."
So Bill is now juggling these 4 nerdy women. Sue Myers, whom he's living with, and has been lovers with for 15 years now, constantly saying he was going to marry her. English teacher Susan Reinert, former student Wendy Ziegler, and Joanne Aitken, the Gothic beauty from Annapolis who is getting ready to go to Harvard.
And Bill is making crazy promises to all of them, telling Joanne that when he gets his sailboat, she'd have an office to study in it, as he and Vince sailed it to Barcelona. Telling Wendy he was going to join her in California, where they would have a fairy tale Catholic wedding in a huge cathedral. And telling Susan Reinert that they're going to move to England together, where they'll live happily ever after, teaching and studying Shakespeare.
And then there's virginal English teacher Vince, who, along with Sue Myers, is still running Bill's weird arts and crafts store in the mall, all by themselves, a business which was failing miserably, some days taking in less than $1.
And all the while, wannabe poet Bill Bradfield sat in his apartment watching Laverne and Shirley and Mork and Mindy and eating cereal.
In the fall of 1978, Susan Reinert's widowed mother passed away, and she inherited $34,000 in cash and a large interest in Western Pennsylvania timberland. And that is when everything began to change.
Suddenly, Bill started saying he despised Susan Reinert, calling her pathetic and needy, and started spreading rumors that she'd been seeing none other than the Prince of Darkness himself, saying she was into violent, kinky sex and having orgies with Dr. Smith, who was out on bail and awaiting trial for impersonating an armored car driver and robbing Sears.
And Bill starts telling Sue, Vince, and Wendy that Dr. Smith was a hitman for the mob, and that he'd killed all kinds of people. And that's why he had the nitric acid in his house, to dissolve their bodies. And he says Dr. Smith was going to kill Susan Reinert because she'd learned things about him during their satanic orgies. Susan Reinert knew too much.
Vince wants to go to the police, but Bill tells them they can't, not until they get real proof. But not to worry, Bill was going to conduct surveillance on Dr. Smith, get absolute proof, and then they can turn him in. But he was going to need help from all of them, all the members of his little cult. Vince, Sue, Wendy, Joanne, and a new guy, too, Christopher Pappas, who'd once been a student of Bill's and was now a substitute teacher at the school.
But, Bill warns them, whatever you do not trust Susan Reinert, because she was now in with Dr. Smith, even though he was secretly plotting to kill her.
Chapter 4. Oh, what a tangled, weird web the poet weaves.
Nietzsche said, poets muddy their own waters to make them look deeper. And the waters of wannabe poet Bill Bradfield were certainly made quite muddy. Opaque, in fact.
In a bizarre sort of reversal, despite telling his little cult that Dr. Smith is basically a serial killer that works for the mob and that he's going to kill Susan Reinert, Bill Bradfield begins saying that Dr. Smith is in fact innocent of the Sears robbery, and he knows it for a fact because he saw him in Ocean City, New Jersey that day, and the two had lunch.
Weirder still, Bill said he suddenly remembered this because of a dream he'd had.
It's all absolutely bizarre. And even more bizarre when Bill goes to the trial of Dr. Smith and testifies that he was with him in Ocean City, New Jersey, hundreds of miles away, at the time of the Sears robbery, so he couldn't possibly have done it.
Bill also tells the jury that Dr. Smith was not only innocent, but a kind and nurturing man, and pleads for them to let the Prince of Darkness go.
Sue, who was with Bill that weekend in Ocean City, didn't recall seeing Dr. Smith, and doesn't remember Bill ever mentioning running into him. As Vince asks Bill, well, if Dr. Smith is truly evil and going to kill Susan Reinert, why would you testify for him?
Bill told the virgin English teacher, I must be truthful. It matters not if he is good or evil. The truth must prevail. It is my solemn duty to present the truth, no matter what may come of it.
But it didn't matter, because the jury didn't believe Bill Bradfield at all, and would say as much. And Dr. J. Smith was found guilty, but he was released on bond and allowed to live at home until his sentencing hearing, which would be in June of 1979.
And now rumors about Dr. J. Smith were circling like a tornado. Some directly attributed to Bill Bradfield, others with nebulous origins. Some very true. Others absolute satanic panic fantasy.
It was said that the good doctor had a devil costume he'd wear to satanic orgies, that he frequented a notorious nightclub and brothel called Plato's, a swingers retreat which catered to bizarre sexual fetishes. It was claimed that the doctor had killed a pair of Doberman pinschers and mutilated their sex organs, that he'd used nitric acid to kill cats, that he'd shit in the hallways of Upper Merion High at night to teach the janitors a lesson, and that he'd had an incestuous relationship with his missing daughter.
It was said that the Prince of Darkness killed prostitutes and disposed of their body parts in trash cans around the high school. And these rumors would make their way through the grapevine and eventually into the news, who would state it as fact that Dr. Smith worshiped the devil and held black masses. Rumors to which there was absolutely no proof, and rumors the good doctor would vehemently deny.
But unbeknownst to all of them, despite saying he despised her and she sickened him, Bill was very, very much still seeing Susan Reinert. In fact, he was seeing her more than ever. Neighbors would later say they often saw his light blue Volkswagen Bug parked there overnight.
And Bill is telling Susan that they're going to run away together, move to England, live in a castle, and study Shakespeare. And they'll be able to accomplish all this after he puts the money she inherited into a guaranteed quick-turn investment that requires a cash deposit.
So Bill talks Susan Reinert into giving him every penny she owns in cash to fund their great adventure.
But when Susan goes to withdraw the money she inherited, the bank is suspicious that she's being scammed. They tell her to use a check so that the money can be traced, even offering to give her a cashier's check, which they explain to her is just as good as cash.
But Susan insists she needs the money in cash, all in hundreds and fifties.
Still skeptical, the bank refuses to let her withdraw the entire sum, and she's forced to take the money out in $1,000 and $5,000 increments over a period of time.
Bill also has Susan make him the sole beneficiary of her will, even gaining custody of her 2 children, Karen, who was 11, and Michael, who was 12, if she were to die, listing Bill as future husband.
Now flush with all this cash, Bill can't help himself and starts showing the money off to his little cult. But he doesn't tell them that the money came from Susan. Oh no. Instead, he claims it's money that he's been saving and saving, even though Sue Meyer says she doesn't remember him ever having money before.
So weird. He has them help wipe the money clean of fingerprints. He's got all these English teacher nerds sitting around wiping money clean, and they do it. Then says, you could get interest on this if you put it in a bank account. And Bill says no, he needs it in cash in case of emergencies.
He then has Vince open a safe deposit box and put the money there for safekeeping. But then he takes it out of there and gives it to Wendy, his lover and former student.
When she asks why he wants her to hold it for him, he says,
This shit's crazy. I don't know how these people went along with this. He says to her, just in case Dr. Smith kills Susan Reinert in the next couple of days, well, Susan has this silly will in which I am named beneficiary. I don't know why, but, well, my assets might be frozen, so I want you to hold on to my cash.
Bill claims Susan put him in her will as a means of manipulating him. And now he's claiming he knows with absolute certainty that the Prince of Darkness is going to kill her and try to frame them. So they all need to be prepared to make alibis.
Bill is showing up with pistols that he says need to have the serial numbers filed off for bizarre reasons, test firing them through homemade silencers. He's telling the little cult that Dr. Smith used chains and a small padlock to bind the wrists and ankles of his victims, demonstrating with his own chains and locks, saying he needed to determine exactly how the doctor abducted people, quoting Sun Tzu's The Art of War, saying they need to know their enemy. They needed to understand nitric acid and how it could be used to dissolve bodies.
And like Dr. Smith, Bill too had stolen nitric acid from the school.
And meanwhile, Susan Reinert is telling friends and family that she and Bill would soon be moving to England to get married. And in March of 1979, she makes out a life insurance policy for $250,000 with a $200,000 accidental death rider, listing Bill Bradfield as her intended husband and sole beneficiary.
Then on June 8th, 1979, she obtains another life insurance policy for $100,000 from New York Life Insurance Company.
And on June 20th, 1979, she bought a third life insurance policy, this time in the amount of $150,000. Again, designating Bill Bradfield as her future husband.
And all of these policies were one-year term policies, which means they had no residual value and would only have cash value if she died within that year.
These life insurance policies are just bizarre. In fact, several of the companies turned her down, saying she was just a high school teacher, wondering why she would get such huge policies taken out. It didn't make any sense to them.
Bill told his group of friends, his weird literary cult, that Susan was making out life insurance policies with him as the beneficiary against his will, as a means of entrapping him, and that if she is murdered by Dr. Smith, they'll all be implicated. So they had to make wild, elaborate alibis and keep everything absolutely secret.
It was like some strange game of three-dimensional chess. But who was he playing against?
As the summer of 1979 approached, Bill had Joanne, the Harvard-bound Gothic ice maiden, stay in a motel in Philadelphia for 3 weeks. Then he abruptly sent her off to New Mexico, sending her strange messages written in code, using a system of letters from Ezra Pound's book on Plato.
Then, in late June, he insisted Sue and Vince go to Cape May, New Jersey with him so that they could establish an alibi hundreds of miles away, saying that this was the weekend when it was all gonna go down, that Dr. Smith, the Prince of Darkness, was going to kill Susan Reiner, and they all needed to make sure they had alibis. Bill insisting the entire weekend vacation be meticulously documented with receipts for everything they did, from their hotel to buying a soda pop.
Sue and Vince jokingly called it Alibi Weekend.
If this was the weekend Susan Reiner was to be murdered, why none of them warned her would remain an ominous question.
And in Harrisburg on June 25th, 1979, Dr. J. Smith, Prince of Darkness, showed up late to his sentencing trial for the Sears robbery. He showed no emotion when he was sentenced to 2 to 5 years in the State Correction Institution at Dallas, Pennsylvania.
And all while, at the same exact time, not far from the Harrisburg courthouse, a horrible scene was unfolding in a motel parking lot.
Chapter 5. The Murder.
On Friday, June 22nd, 1979, at 9:30 at night, Susan Reiner was seen by her neighbor, leaving her home in a hurry in the middle of a ferocious hail and rainstorm with her 2 children, 11-year-old Karen and 10-year-old Michael. And her neighbor wondered, what could be so important that you leave in the middle of a storm at night?
The next day, Susan had been scheduled to present a workshop at the Parents Without Partners conference in Allentown, but had been a no-show for the event, causing concern as she had become an integral part of her local chapter.
At 5:20 in the morning on June 25th, 1979, a strange phone call was made to the Harrisburg Police Department. A man with a Spanish accent, saying his name was Larry Brown, whispered,
"There's a Sikh woman in a car in the parking lot of the Host Inn."
The call was recorded, and within 10 minutes, patrolmen were in the parking lot of the Host Inn, where they found an orange Plymouth Horizon with the hatchback partially opened. Stuffed inside, in a fetal position, was the naked body of Susan Reiner.
There were chain marks on her wrists and ankles. Her eyes were black and blue. Her front teeth had ripped through her lower lip. There were abrasions behind her knees and bruises about her pale, nude body.
There was no clothing in the car, no purse, no keys. There was a large strap-on dildo under the front seat.
And when her body was removed, there was a plastic comb beneath the body, reading 79th USAR Com. Yes, the exact same type of comb that Dr. Smith had in his basement of depravity.
Although there was no identification, police were able to assume the body was that of the registered owner of the car, Susan Reiner, English teacher at Upper Merion High, part of the elite mainline suburb of Pennsylvania.
The body was taken to the Community General Osteopathic Hospital, and an autopsy was performed by Dauphin County Coroner Dr. William Bush, who, it should be noted, was not a forensic pathologist, but an internist, who concluded that she died from anoxia due to respiratory failure, which may or may not have been caused by suffocation. Basically meaning she'd simply stopped breathing.
Because of the multi-jurisdictional elements of the case involving many separate counties, the Pennsylvania State Troopers led the investigation, and one Sergeant Joe Van Nort was put in charge.
And Sergeant Van Nort was not satisfied with the autopsy at all. Though there were some tantalizing clues, red fibers and blue bits of material found in her hair, what appeared to be sand between her toes, cuts and clear markings of a chain on her wrists and ankles, and it appeared she'd had tape over her mouth at some point. There were too many glaring mysteries, including how she'd died. Of course she'd stopped breathing, that told him nothing. So he ordered the body to be held after identification so that a second opinion could be had by another coroner with a more thorough autopsy.
Susan's ex-husband Ken was called to come to the morgue and identify the body, which he did, trembling as he said, "Yes, that's my ex-wife," then wailing, "Bill Bradfield was the bastard that ruined my marriage."
Then Ken turned to the officers and stammered,
"My kids, Karen and Michael, who has my kids?"
The police just looked at each other in silence. They had no idea there were children involved. It was quickly ascertained that the children were, in fact, missing, and had last been seen alive leaving the house with their mother on that dark night of rain and hail 3 days earlier.
After being officially identified, Susan's body was fingerprinted and then handed over to the undertaker, who took it to the funeral home and promptly cremated it, as had been the family request.
Sergeant Van Nort was livid, screaming, "You mean we lost the body?"
Now there would be no second opinion, no further examination, no more forensic study and possible clues with another autopsy. Even the actual cause of death would remain a mystery.
Then the sergeant requested the tape of the mysterious caller with the Spanish accent. Perhaps they could analyze the tape and see if the caller was someone in her friend group. There could be some clue on that tape.
But again, they hit a roadblock. The tape had not been saved, and instead, to somehow save money, someone decided to recycle it and tape over it.
Sergeant Van Nort, again, was shaking with anger. He was nearing retirement, and this could be the last big case of his career. He didn't want it to end in failure, especially as there were now 2 missing children.
A massive search was undertaken for the children. Their heartbreaking photos circulated about, the toothy grin of Michael and sparkling eyes of Karen. Squadrons and squadrons of police were sent out. They searched homes, trucks, trunks of cars, excavation sites, cemeteries, dumpsters, caverns, manholes. Psychics were called in. Eventually, the FBI was brought in, all to no avail.
Bill Bradfield was an immediate suspect, as he had the most to profit from her murder, beneficiary to all her assets, as well as several large life insurance policies. And despite his alibi weekend, it was only a little over 3 hours from Harrisburg to Cape May, meaning he could have slipped away and made the trip. His alibi weekend certainly didn't rule him out at all.
Bill was now in New Mexico, taking summer classes with Ice Queen Joanne Aitken at St. John's College on Plato and the creation of the cosmos.
So Sergeant Van Nort flew out to New Mexico to question Bill. But Bill frustratingly refused to talk, telling them to submit their questions to his attorney in Philadelphia and that he'd then provide the answers. The Ice Maiden, too, refused to answer any questions.
Obviously pissed off that he'd flown all the way to New Mexico for nothing, Sergeant Van Nort went to work on Bill's weird cult, telling Sue Myers that she was next, that Bill was going to kill her, telling Virgin Vince that if Bill went down, he was going down with him.
But the cult held strong, saying Bill couldn't have done it, that he'd been with them the whole time, and keeping all the strange talk of alibis, large amounts of cash, chains, guns, and silencers to themselves. For now, that is. Eventually, they'd crack.
Chapter 6. Time keeps on ticking.
In the fall of 1979, Bill left New Mexico and went back to teaching at Upper Merion High, and the investigation stalled.
1979 turned into 1980, and all hope of ever finding the children was lost. The FBI removed 16 of the 18 agents they had assigned to the case, and the Pennsylvania State Police cut back their manpower as well.
But then, a year after the murder, greedy Bill Bradfield did something that changed everything. He moved to probate the will and collect the insurance policies, which would net him $1.1 million. But before he could collect, he would have to go to court and testify under oath in a civil proceeding.
For Sergeant Van Nort, this was exactly what he needed to get the investigation back on track, and he was delighted.
So on June 10th, 1980, Bill Bradfield went to Orphans Court to claim beneficiary to the will. And there in the back of the courtroom sat Van Nort. But when Bill Bradfield took the stand, he had no idea each and every one of his words was being scrutinized.
Bill testified that he and Susan Reiner were only good friends and had never even discussed marriage, despite her listing him as her future husband on the insurance policies. He claimed he had no idea that she had inherited any money, and he had certainly never received any of it. He claimed he wasn't even aware of the 3 insurance policies, or that he was sole executor of her estate.
Lie after provable lie, all under oath, and Sergeant Van Nort grinned, thinking, we got him now.
And even worse, when Bill's cult of nerds hears what he'd said on the stand, what he testified to under oath, they realize that he was spinning a crazy web of lies, because he told them all about the will and the insurance policies himself. And it was then that they started to cave.
First, jilted lover Sue Myers kicks him out of their apartment, not allowing him to even take his precious books, forcing Bill to move in with his mother. Then Virgin Vince starts blabbering, breaking down in tears as he tells how Bill had bundles of cash he needed wiped of fingerprints, and how he'd helped him file the serial numbers off a gun.
When Bill hears Vince's squealing, he tells him, your disloyalty has killed me.
So what Sergeant Van Nort decided to wisely do to keep the ball rolling and the pressure on was arrest Bill Bradfield, not for murder, but for theft by deception and insurance fraud.
Van Nort and some other troopers went to Bill's mother's house and rounded him up. And Bill's first words to them were, are you arresting me for murder?
Van Nort said, nope, just theft by deception, theft by failure to make required disposition of funds received, and conspiracy.
Bill looked visibly relieved, but then stammered, Are you going to arrest any of my friends?
Yeah, Wendy Ziegler for conspiracy.
Oh, I wish you'd let me call her first. She's such a fragile child.
When the FBI heard that Van Nort was going to arrest Wendy, they were not happy, telling him that she was just a kid and didn't know the money she was hiding had belonged to Susan Raynert.
But Van Nort knew getting Wendy to talk was key to the investigation, and arresting her was the only way to make her start singing. And he told the feds, she's been holding out on me, and don't give me that kid stuff.
The FBI told him that's not a crime, you can't do it.
Yeah? Watch me.
And so Wendy was arrested and released to her parents on $10,000 bail.
And just like that, Wendy Ziegler begins talking and agreed to become a witness against Bill Bradfield if the charges against her were dropped.
The whole ruse worked like a charm.
On July 29th, 1981, now 2 years since the murder, Bill Bradfield was brought to court for robbery, and Wendy testified against him, weeping as she said,
He was my teacher. He taught me English, Latin, Greek, and the Bible. At first it was just a student-teacher relationship. Then we became romantically involved. He promised me marriage. He told me his relationship with Susan Raynert was purely platonic.
They asked her if Bill had ever given her money to hide for him. She said yes, $25,000, which she'd hid in her closet, saying he told her it was all his money that he'd saved up himself.
It took the jury less than an hour to find him guilty of 2 counts of theft and sentenced him to 4 months in prison.
The courtroom broke out in applause at the verdict, and the judge had to admonish them to be quiet and respectful in the courtroom.
Chapter 7. Joseph Wambaugh.
And then novelist, true crime author, and Hollywood movie producer Joseph Wambaugh came to town, making a big old stir.
Joseph Wambaugh, who'd spent 14 years with the Los Angeles Police Department, had written 9 international best-selling books, both fiction and nonfiction. He'd also produced several films, including the very successful The Onion Field, based on his book of the same name.
He was charming, good-looking, charismatic. Cops loved him and saw him as one of their own, and readers adored his prose. He was a bona fide celebrity and bigwig who came to town wanting to write a true crime book about this absolutely bizarre murder case, and joined up with Sergeant Van Nort, who also fell under his spell and loved him as well.
Meanwhile, while Joseph Wambaugh was wining and dining Van Nort, the investigation into Susan Reinert's murder, which had been handled by Pennsylvania state troopers, aided by the FBI, was officially taken over by Pennsylvania State Attorney General Leroy S. Zimmerman.
In November of 1981, Zimmerman told reporters,
"It's a cold case, a difficult case, but it's a case that warrants a new look. The time has come for a new coordinated effort by all levels of law enforcement, county, state, and federal, to solve this bizarre murder."
A grand jury was impaneled and began issuing subpoenas and interviewing folks. And on April 6, 1983, nearly 4 years after the body of Susan Reinert had been discovered, William Bradfield, who'd been released from prison for thievery charges a year earlier, was taken back into custody and charged with 3 counts of murder: conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and obstructing the administration of the law.
The indictment alleged that old poet Bill had been aware that his acquaintance, J. Smith, the Prince of Darkness, was going to kill Susan Reinert and her 2 children, but had done nothing to stop it, had possibly even conspired with Smith to let the crimes take place. Surprisingly, though, no charges were filed against Dr. Smith at this time.
Chapter 8. The Murder Trials.
You'd think you were born the son of a dynastic king. You were raised on truffles and tutors and other fine things. For all the glory you're cloaked in, the story's a lie. See the empty, sad feeling you can't feel inside. And I'm sorry that the lives led by the common class fail to live up to your standards. We know you're such a big spender after all. Fresh out of college, you were gifted 1,000 fine souls, and you promised dear daddy you'd use them to meet all his goals. But come Q3, he saw that you failed to meet quota, and proud dad could not believe he had spawned such a failure. Sorry, the product of the working class failed to deliver your bonus. You would think that the onus was on the people who call themselves leaders.
Bill Bradfield, now 50 and broke, would have to let his previous lawyer go as he could no longer afford him, and formally requested to be represented by a public defender, citing a lack of funds as his rationale, and in October of 1983, pled not guilty.
All the members of his little literary cult were shuffled up to the witness stand to testify.
The ever-loyal ice maiden, Joanne Aitken, the only one who'd be faithful in her devotion to the poet until the end, denied knowing anything at all about anything, despite the prosecution pointing to the cryptic notes Bill sent in secret codes, some of which seemed pretty damning, one that the FBI deciphered, stating, in part, and edited for clarity,
"Immunity, improbable. My danger, conspiracy. Love you terribly. Hurt for you. Lawyers warn there will be FBI plant near you soon. Car bugged. You know nothing about the case. You must maintain this all the way through the trial, hand on Bible forever. Wish I were lying next to you and holding you. Destroy this. And ashes. When coding, use last number, then first, and so forth, back and forth. Destroy messages after receiving them. Destroy without being observed. Destroy completely. If ashes are left, destroy them also.
And you will fall. You will fall. You will.
Though loyal and incredibly intelligent, apparently the Ice Maiden didn't follow directions very well.
Virgin Vince told of all the strange goings-on, but said he still thought Bill was innocent and that Dr. Smith was the real killer.
Sue Myers was over it and implicated her former lover, who'd kept her hanging on for over 15 years.
A jailhouse snitch then claimed Bill had confessed to the murder during a game of chess, which, by the way, Bill totally hustled this guy. At first claiming, oh, he didn't even know how to play chess. Show me how to move these pieces. And then whooped him 3 times in a row. The snitch claimed Bill had told him, none of this was meant for the children, only for Susan. It was a shame they had to suffer.
Bill even took the stand himself, still spouting lie after lie, saying he'd never been romantically involved with Susan Reinert, despite the sexy love letters and the fact that she'd left her husband for him.
On October 28, 1983, the jury found Bill Bradfield guilty of 3 counts of murder. He was then sentenced by the judge.
Because there was no physical proof, the judge ruled that the state had failed to provide evidence of, quote, aggravated circumstances, end quote, and the death penalty was taken off the table. But the judge gave him 3 life sentences to run concurrently, not consecutively, meaning there was no possible way Bill Bradfield was ever going to be a free man again.
Bye-bye, Bill. Was nice knowing you.
And then on June 25th, 1985, 6 years to the day that Susan Reinert's body was found, Dr. J. Smith, the Prince of Darkness, already serving time for the armored car scam, was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder.
Dr. Smith's lawyer, who was assigned to him by the judge, was one William C. Kostopoulos, who'd go on to write a book about the experience entitled Principal Suspect, which was one of our sources.
Unlike with Bill, there was some actual physical evidence tying Dr. Smith to the murder.
There were the red fibers found in Susan's hair, which appeared to match a rug of his, a rug that he'd strangely asked his cancer-ravaged wife to dispose of after the murder.
There was also a hair found in his house, which resembled Susan's.
And a pin from the Philadelphia Museum of Art that was found in his car that could possibly have come from one of the children.
And of course, there was the plastic comb that was found beneath the body, which was directly linked to Dr. J.C. Smith.
But the hair and fiber evidence was flimsy at best. And as for the pin from the museum, 600,000 of these pins are given out every year, and the doctor himself was known to visit the place.
And as for the plastic comb? Come on, that looked like a setup. Would a meticulous criminal like J. Smith really leave a comb beneath the body? The whole thing looked like a setup. The car appearing there in Harrisburg on the same day as his sentencing trial? Why the hell would he do that?
And why had the children gone missing, never to be found, but the body of Susan was left right there to find?
Well, if there's no body, there's no life insurance payout, and the will can't go into probate.
It doesn't take a genius to see that Bill Bradfield had everything to gain and had been setting up Dr. Smith to take the fall from the beginning. And there also appeared to be some evidence that Susan Reinert may have been at Cape May with Bill, namely sand that was found between her toes, as reported by former state trooper John Balashi, who was at the autopsy. Though, when defense attorney Kostopoulos brought this up, it was denied by the prosecution, who brought in another trooper to say that her feet were perfectly clean and spotless.
And oddly enough, there were no, quote, lifters, quote, end quote, in evidence. These sticky rubber things that are put between the toes to collect evidence in an autopsy, though there should have been. They appeared to be missing.
The debate over whether there was sand on the feet of Susan Reinert and whether lifters had been used during the autopsy became so fierce in the courtroom that John Balashi was accused of perjury, accused of lying under oath about the sand, and it was struck from the record.
And just like with Bill Bradfield, there was, conveniently, a jailhouse snitch claiming Dr. Smith had confessed, a former cop named Raymond Martre, who'd been convicted of running a burglary ring.
This disgraced former cop gave testimony despite having failed a lie detector test. And on the stand, he swore he was giving his testimony because he'd become a born-again Christian and was on a crusade against evil, and that he was receiving no compensation for his testimony, no preferential treatment at all. He was doing it all just out of the sincerity of his heart.
Martre claimed Dr. Smith had told him, quote, "I killed the bitch."
After a 5-week trial, the jury broke for deliberation in April of 1986, and after 6 hours, returned on Wednesday, April 30th, with a verdict of guilty. Dr. J. Smith, the principal of darkness, was sentenced to death in the electric chair.
On June 22nd, 1986, Susan Reinert's children, Michael and Karen, were officially declared dead.
Chapter 9, Echoes in the Darkness.
On February 23, 1987, Joseph Wambaugh's book on the case, entitled Echoes in the Darkness, was released. It was an immediate bestseller and was on the New York Times bestseller list for weeks.
Wambaugh had originally planned to call the book Blood Crimson, but then decided to use an Ezra Pound quote instead.
The cops and prosecution team were now heroes and local celebrities and went out partying, going to Hollywood to vacation, buy Porsches, whooping it up. There was even going to be a TV movie made about the case. They couldn't have been happier, and they all had Joseph Wambaugh to thank.
But while the cops and prosecution were celebrating, Dr. Smith's defense attorney, William Kostopoulos, was finding some very, very strange things.
First, he received a strange anonymous phone call that, while jailhouse snitch, disgraced cop, and convicted thief Alexander Martre had sworn under oath he'd received no deal for his testimony and no preferential treatment, he had in fact not only received a lot of preferential treatment, but actually been released from prison for his testimony.
And then it was revealed that there was a cocaine dealing ring going on in the Attorney General's office. They were all high on coke and hooking their friends up.
Of course, they denied it, but it was big news, widely reported, and everyone accused resigned, including the prosecutor in Dr. J's case.
These are the same guys that were hanging out with Joseph Wambaugh, going on vacations with him. I wonder if they were hooking him up with some blow while he was in Pennsylvania. The guy was one prolific writer.
Then the big news. Huge. It was revealed that those lifters that had been missing from the autopsy that had caused such a fervor in the courtroom, that the prosecution claimed didn't exist, had been hidden, and they'd had them all along.
Not only that, the lifters had been examined by the FBI, and there was in fact sand on them, revealing that Susan Reinert just might have been in New Jersey with Bill, which, if true, would have exonerated Dr. Smith.
This is all some serious, serious misconduct by a prosecution team that was possibly high on cocaine, as well as caught up in the glamour of having a best-selling author and movie producer buddying up to them, and in a capital murder case, no less, where the verdict was death.
So defense attorney Kostopoulos went to the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania and argued Dr. J should receive a new trial. And on Christmas Eve, 1989, the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania said they would hear the argument. But this was just the tip of the iceberg. It was going to get much, much crazier. You will not believe this shit.
Chapter 10. What's in the box?
On March 8th, 1992, just 2 months before the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania was to take up the case of misconduct in the trial of J. Smith, an antique dealer and junk man named Mark Hughes, who'd clean houses and estates in order to keep any scrap metal or goods he could sell, was hired to clean the attic and basement of State Trooper Jack Holtz, who'd headed the investigation of J. Smith after Sergeant Van Nort had died.
Inside one of the boxes in the attic was a crazy find, and it almost got incinerated. At first, believing there might be a barbecue grill inside, Mark glanced in and noticed a bunch of notebooks, all labeled murder.
These were the original notebooks of Susan Reinert's murder investigation. 23 of them.
There was also a plastic bag with the actual comb found beneath Susan Reinert's body, with FBI markings on it, meaning a duplicate comb had been presented as evidence in the trial.
Awful fishy. Now, why would the prosecution not use the original comb? Fuck if I know. But it's strange and definitely evidence tampering.
And in one of the notebooks, it was stated that Raymond Martre not only received favors, but had originally clearly stated that Smith told him he, quote, did not kill the fucking bitch, meaning he was pressured to lie and omit the not from his statement on the stand.
Then they found a letter from author Joseph Wambaugh to the original investigator, Sergeant Joe Van Nort, offering to pay him $50,000 in 1980 money for all information on the case, and stating the book could not be published unless there was a trial to end the story with. And there was also instructions to keep all of this a secret.
And there was an IRS receipt for $50,000 from Joseph Wambaugh to none other than Jack Holtz himself. All of this seeming to indicate that both Joe Van Nort and Jack Holtz had more or less been bribed into charging J. Smith with the murder, just so Joseph Wambaugh could have an ending for his book.
Insane. Absolutely insane.
I mean, I do a lot of things to get an ending for a book I was struggling with, but this is fucking nuts.
Yeah, right. Lucky for you, you can just make it up. He's got to actually have it happen.
Right.
So the investigators were basically paid $50,000 each to ensure J. Smith was brought to trial. And then the prosecutors withheld evidence and had their snitch lie on the stand.
Armed with all of this, defense attorney Kostopoulos decided to not ask the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania for a new trial, but to instead ask that the Pennsylvania law regarding double jeopardy, that a person can't be tried twice for the same crime, be changed to include cases of extreme prosecutorial misconduct, basically asking that his client, Dr. J. Smith, be immediately released.
And he got it. On September 18th, 1992, Justice Flattery wrote in the Commonwealth versus J.C. Smith, quote,
In this infamous murder case, we are compelled to order the discharge of appellant J.C. Smith. Despite our prior holding granting a retrial, we now hold that the prosecutorial misconduct during appellant's first trial was not only impermissible, but had constitutional implications under the Double Jeopardy Clause, which prohibit retrial.
And that very evening, the Prince of Darkness was released from death row, a free man.
Chapter 11. The Aftermath.
Jilted lover Sue Myers received $10,000 from Joseph Wambaugh for helping him with his book and disappeared, living her life in anonymity, hopefully happily, after all she'd been through.
Interestingly, as noted by defense attorney Kostopoulos in his book Principal Suspect, the apartment she shared with Bill Bradfield, which may have contained evidence, as he'd left all his belongings there, and she refused to ever let him retrieve them, was never searched. Were there clues to the fate of the children amongst his books and papers, perhaps written in secret code? We'll never know.
The Ice Maiden, Joanne Aitken, the only one of Bill's cult that never caved to the police, graduated from Harvard with a master's degree in architecture. And her love for imprisoned and convicted murderer, Bill Bradfield, never diminished. She visited him and wrote him loyally to the very end.
Wendy Ziegler, who'd had an affair with Bradfield as a student at Upper Merion High and envisioned a fairy tale Catholic wedding with the wannabe poet, is rumored to have become a nun. Her whereabouts are unknown.
Vincent Valitas, the Catholic virgin English teacher, continued to teach at Upper Merion High, but eventually admitted that he too had been paid off by Joseph Wambaugh and inflated his testimony on the stand for the writer's benefit.
Jay Smith sued both the Pennsylvania State Police and Joseph Wambaugh, and though he lost both cases, said making them all squirm was worth it and gave him great satisfaction. He wrote a book entitled Joseph Wambaugh and the J. Smith Case. He theorizes that after being murdered by Bill Bradfield, the missing children were driven to New Mexico by Joanne Aitken and buried in the desert. But there's no proof to that at all. He remarried in 2002, and he and his second wife became resident administrators of an adult care facility and subsequently lived in a community for senior citizens. He died from a heart condition on May 12, 2009 at 81 years old, and was buried with full military honors at the Chapel Lawn Burial Park in Dallas, Pennsylvania.
Bill Bradfield died in prison of a heart attack on January 16, 1998, at 64 years old. In his possession were coded messages and a single Polaroid picture, estimated to have been taken sometime in the 80s, possibly given to him by Joanne Aitken, that appeared to show crude grave markings in a forest. Some theorize this is the spot where Susan Reinert's children were buried. But this is pure speculation, and even where this place is remains unknown. To this day, what exactly happened, how Susan was murdered, who drove her car, and what became of her children remains a mystery. As does what happened to Jay Smith's daughter Stephanie and her husband, Edward Huntsberger. Unfortunately, sometimes in life, there are no answers. Only echoes in the darkness.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of J.C. Smith, the Prince and Principal of Darkness, and the Mainline Murders. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you've enjoyed Fast Times at Upper Merion High.
And do you have a case you'd like us to cover? Let us know at murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. That's murdercoasterpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next week with more tales of madness and murder.
Till then.